I put together a talk for you, kind of in a different way than I usually do, because those of you who know me know I can be a little rigid. I can be a little, my friend back there is saying, no, that's not you. In fact, I'm very businesslike. In fact, even my jokes are very formal. So I decided to do something a little different in sharing my story with you. So Ginger, true to Ginger form, whenever you're talking to Ginger, she's going to find out what about that conversation will forward God's mission and what will have the get-together succeed. So a couple of months ago, she says to me, what's going on with the pandemic and how are you doing? And I shared with her the pivot that we'd done, and all of a sudden it turned into my standing up here in front of you. And so she wanted me to share my story of how I got from A to B, how I got from being born to standing in front of you today and making a difference in the world per God's plan for me. So in sharing my story with you, I decided to get a little more personal than I usually do, so a little less formal. So you'll see some pictures here that might surprise you a little bit. So just a little bit of background, a little bit of backstory about me. Like she said, I went to the University of Texas at Austin. I grew up in Austin, restaurant owner family, okay, and knew that restaurant owning was not going to be the path that I would take. Little did I know business owning would be the path I would take. So I worked in the software business for 15 years. I was a road warrior and accumulated travel points as a hobby of mine. So for 20 years or so, bouncing around on airplanes and teaching people how to use software products and doing management consulting. And so I've done a lot. And all that time, I didn't know I was really following God's purpose for me to support and help as many people as possible and to lift them up. And so my talk today is about living from your purpose, because I've been living from mine, even though I didn't know about it sometimes. So I want to introduce you to somebody here, and this is a pensive child, okay? This is a child who was always wondering what it is she's supposed to be doing in life. And this is 7-year-old Gabrielle. And this is about the time I can remember I started to wonder what my life was about. I was that young. Because I would look out in our neighborhood and look at kids who had less than I did, and I would feel completely blessed, but at the same time guilty, that I had so many gifts and talents and education and family, and other kids didn't. So I asked myself the question, again, at that young age, what am I supposed to be doing here? Is it an accident that I'm here? Now, I never talked to anybody about that, okay? Because that would have just been weird for a kid of that age to be that inquisitive and that curious. And so I just kept it to myself the whole time. And if there's any one word that could have described me back then, and a little bit now, even though people can't really see it much, it's that I was a dreamer. I would sit there and dream about what am I supposed to do, who am I supposed to be, and what's God's purpose for me. And that's the Gabrielle I wanted to introduce you here to here today, because a lot of people don't know that one. A lot of people just know the formal one, the one who's very driven, the one who looks like she has her box all put together, and I really don't. I'm really scared of my shadow most of the time. But I don't let many people know that. And so I decided to stand up in front of 50, 60, 70 people and tell one on myself. Right, Roger? Telling one on myself. Okay, so my journey to where I got today included some milestones in my life, as it has for everybody. And a few of the milestones were taking some trips overseas. So I want to share with you about one of the trips that I took to Africa. And before I share with you about the trip, I want to share one of the other milestones that happened. And that was, I met my husband, Bill. We were dating, obviously, at first. And he was working at a company that gave away 50% of their profits every year to charity. And he had to repeat that a few times for me because I didn't quite get what he meant by that. And he said that the owner of the company, John, said that he wanted to see the money that he built over time make a difference while he was still here, rather than waiting to the end and then give it all away towards the end of his life. So it intrigued me. And they ended up giving away millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they ended up giving some money to a micro-lending bank in Africa. And so Bill and I were privileged enough to go to visit Africa. And I'll never forget that trip, because that's the point at which I realized I wanted to do something that John had done. And I started to ask myself the question, what can I do and what can I build that can make that kind of difference? That could mobilize people in that way. That could have people in a community come together, build a bank, and then have these people from America go over to Africa and see what the bank did and be a witness to God doing his work in another country. So I said, there's got to be something for me to do here. Now, I'm not going to build the same kind of company that John built. It was a capital management firm. Not really my forte. Wasn't going to do that, and didn't think I would eventually build a bank that did micro-lending, but I knew that there was something for me to do, and so my wheels started turning, and 8 years later, we end up where we end up. But that was a real calling for me, to start to look and discover what it is I could do and who I could be to make the kind of impact that John was making. And he knows I share about him, by the way, so I have his permission. So we go to Africa, and we walk into this bank, and people have their papers, and they're signing their names, and some of them don't know how to sign their names. And I just walked away completely baffled that there was another way to live life other than in the U.S. And so I remember coming back on the plane and saying, gosh, I have some work to do. I don't know what it's going to be, but I have some work to do. And then I just kind of put things to the side. So all this time I'm doing these athletic events, and I'm working at this software company, and I'm doing some IT consulting and whatnot, and still thinking, okay, what is it that I'm here to do? And while I'm doing these triathlons, I'm noticing that people gather around me. People kind of come around me and they want to be a part of what I'm doing. So I started to realize I'm pretty good at mobilizing people. I'm that kind of person that says, hey, you want to come do this? And then 10 people come along and do it. And so I said, well, maybe that's part of my purpose, is to mobilize people. So then I kind of put that aside. So then in another few years, my husband, Bill, was the treasurer of a children's nonprofit called Cherish Our Children International, or Incorporated, and some of you know it. And we had funded some work that they were doing in Israel. It was called a Bridge to Peace project, where they bring kids from Palestine and they bring kids from the West Bank. They bring kids from all over the place and have them come to play soccer together. And so we went overseas to go to Israel to go visit and see what that project was doing. And that was another big milestone for me, because I didn't quite understand what it was like for people to, and this is going to sound kind of funny, to really not get along. Like, they really just didn't get along over there. And the stress and the strife was really palpable for me. And that, like I said, was another milestone, because I said, if we have a world where people don't get along at this level, what fighting chance do we have? They're still kind of not getting along over there. You do know that, right? Yes, Steve. That is the case. So we go over there, we spend a few days, and we even crossed over one of the makeshift walls, because they're really not walls over there. And if you've never been to Israel, you don't understand what it means to be a Swiss cheese wall. There really is no wall. But you can cross over these, I call them artificial barriers, and cross on over into Palestine. And it's a whole different world. And it struck my heart to the core, because I said, if we have this going on, and I have abilities, and I have talents, and I have skills, and I know I can mobilize people, I know there's a way I can make a difference. And so I was on the airplane reading a USA Today or whatever it was, and I said, it's time for me to do something. It's time for me to answer God's calling and do whatever it is that I need to do, and I know that I can get people in a room together to be smart, and to work together, and to be effective. I know I can do that. And that was the initial point at which I knew I was going to build my own business that was going to have people get out and do something for others and be a voice for others. So then, my husband one day, and if you know Bill, you know he's always right? Teresa, yes. Hilda, he's always right. So he says to us, look, we've been doing these triathlons and we've been raising money for charity, and we're having people ask us if we can help them do it too. Why don't we just build our own platform, our own system, and let people raise money for whatever charity they want at whatever level they want. And so that's how Reason to Race was born. So Bill says this idea, and I'm like, no, we can't do this quite yet. And all the time I'm doing triathlon events, and I'm raising money for these kids. And then there comes a day when I finally wanted to do the event of all events, and that was the Ironman Triathlon. And I wanted to do it to raise money for these kids. And if you don't know what Ironman Triathlon consists of, it consists of swimming 2.4 miles, biking 112 miles, and then you top it off with a marathon at the end, 26.2 miles. And you have 17 hours to do it, and I did it in 16:04. Roger, yes, 04. Okay, there was an 04 there. I did it right over 16. And so that was the day that I received this medal. If you've never seen an Ironman Triathlon medal, that's what it looks like. My friend Jennifer says I should wear it every day. I decline. And so that was the day that I crossed the finish line, and it was the first year that my people, my group of friends over the year had raised $100,000 for this children's charity. Some of them did 5K, some of them did Ironman, some of them did all kinds of different events. But that was the first year we did it. And remember, Bill had already planted the seed that we should build Reason to Race and let people fundraise online for whatever charity they want. And the day I crossed the finish line, I said, that's what we're going to do. And so I grabbed 30 sheets of blank paper, and I wrote out some specs, and we found a developer, and we built a fundraising platform called Reason to Race. And over the last 11 years, that's been my calling. I've been working with people, and alongside my husband, Bill, nothing happens significant without him, been working with him to mobilize people to get out there and do something fun, do something healthy, and do it for a cause that's close to their heart. And so here's a picture of one of the events that we partnered with about 16 different events all throughout the year, whether they're 5Ks or triathlons. And then this is a group of people, a company that came together and said, we're going to do a 5K, and we're going to do it for a children's charity as well. And so we get the privilege of going out to these events and getting all these people up on stage and taking pictures and have them have a great time and feel like rock stars for 2.5 minutes while they're up on stage. And so what I want to tell you a story about is when this lady here, Courtney, let's see, where is she? One of the special lady in my life, Courtney, she had never run a 5K and had never fundraised for charity. So she tells me after a couple months of talking, I want to do it for the Cerebral Palsy Association of New Orleans. And she did that because her friend Stephanie had a daughter named Kennedy who had cerebral palsy. So Courtney crosses the finish line, raises over $2,000 for this organization. The friend says, you know what now I'm going to do is I'm going to sell T-shirts to fundraise for the Cerebral Palsy Association as well. I look at Courtney, I say, did you ever think that any of this would be possible? She says, no, I never did. I'm so glad I met you. Thank you for giving me a reason to race. I said, you're very welcome. And I have hundreds and hundreds of those stories. And so what God called me to do was to be someone who could motivate people to be the best they can be. He showed me what my purpose was all throughout my life with these milestones. I didn't really know at every point, and I questioned, but I did know that there was something bigger calling me. And so with that, the pandemic hit. Remember the pandemic? Yes. The pandemic hit, and I started to realize that our business might go under. And so Bill and I put our thinking caps on and realized we have a number of skills and talents, and what it's time for us to do is to pivot. And so with the pandemic pivot, I started to do executive coaching, I started to do leadership development, different board trainings, and different technology workshops like Ginger had mentioned. And then I realized my net was wider. And so my purpose has widened a bit to not only serving the nonprofit community and doing fundraising events, but to serving people and to speaking to their hearts and having them see that their goals can be accomplished should they want to choose to work with me so that we can lay out a path for their success. And I'll share with you one last story, and that is I have a friend who I've known for years, and he's now doing executive coaching with me, and for the first time in 3 years, he said the reason he's building his business is to build generational wealth. And now he's asking people questions he's never asked before. He's making requests that he's never made before because he told me he would. And the first time he told me he'd do something and didn't do it, I said, no, pass. You can't tell me you're going to do something and not do it, because this is about building generational wealth and having your children have a future that they can't even know is possible now. So you can't tell me you're going to do something and not do it. And the very next thing he told me he would do, guess what? He did it. So with that, I want to give you a question to ask yourself, and that is, what is your purpose? You might already know what it is. You might think you know what it is. You might question it, and that's fine. But know that it is there because you're in this room. And at whatever level you choose to follow that purpose, I say go for it with your full heart. Because we all started at the same place. So I'll show you another little picture here. This is Gabrielle hamming it up at some point, right? Ready to take on the world and not quite knowing that what was in store for her was to do this thing called the Ironman triathlon that would inspire and motivate people to be the best they can be. So with that, I thank you, I honor you, and I appreciate you for all you do for the community, because without you, we simply don't have a world that works. Thank you very much.